Just very quickly before I jump into the video, I do want to make y'all aware of my new blog that I created called Specialis Revelio Harry Potter, where I will be doing an analytical read-through of the entire Harry Potter series. On the blog, I will be going chapter by chapter, analyzing different aspects of each chapter, and then I'll be doing a full video for each book on my YouTube channel. Essentially how it's going to work is that there's going to be a blog post for every single chapter within the Harry Potter series. And in these posts, I will be analyzing different aspects of whatever chapter is at hand, things such as the summary or looking for patterns that develop, or any sort of in-depth thing that happens within the chapter I will be analyzing and looking at in depth. So if you are a Potterhead like me or are reading the series for the first time, I would really appreciate if you would go check it out, see what you think. I am obviously a huge Harry Potter nerd and I love doing analytical stuff, so like I said, I would really appreciate if you went and checked it out. But now let's jump into the actual video at hand. Hey y'all, so today I'm going to be talking about the unfinished series that I own. So in the context of this video, what I mean when I'm talking about unfinished series isn't necessarily series where all the books are not out. What I'm talking about for this video are series that I've started and that I own at least one book from, but I haven't caught up to the books that are out yet. So just as an example, something like the Bone Season series doesn't count here because although the series is not yet finished, as in all the books are not out, I have read all the books that are out of that series. Because basically the point of today's video is to talk about why I have not yet caught up to these series, and in some cases, if I even do plan on catching up to these series. And this is where y'all come in, because there are certain series that I'm going to talk about where I'm kind of on the fence as to whether or not I actually want to continue the series. And so you guys can give me your suggestions down in the comments about whether or not you liked them, so it helps me figure out whether or not I actually want to continue with some of these. So I'm going to start with the series that I am most likely to catch up on or to finish, and then near the end of the video is when I'll talk about some of the series that I'm not quite so sure on. And the first series up on this list is actually one that I will hopefully be caught up to by the time that this video is actually published, and that is The Diviners by Libba Bray. I read book 1 of this series back in October of 2014, and I went back recently and listened to the audiobook of The Diviners and am currently listening to the audiobook of Lair of Dreams, which is its sequel. As it stands, those are the only 2 books out in the series so far, so hopefully I will catch up on the series soon and knock one of these off of my list. The next series up on this list is The Queen of the Tearling trilogy by Erica Johansson. Currently the first 2 books are out, this one and its sequel, The Invasion of the Tearling, and I've only read The Queen of the Tearling. And there's no real rhyme or reason for why I haven't yet continued this series, other than the fact that I just haven't been in the mood to pick it up again, but I did really love this first book, so I do plan on finishing it sometime in the fairly near future. Book 3 comes out sometime this fall, so I wouldn't be surprised if I ended up picking up book 2 sometime soon and then picking up book 3 once it's released. The next series on this list is The Stormlight Archive by Brandon Sanderson. So far, only book 1, The Way of Kings, and book 2, which you see right here on my shelves, which is Words of Radiance, are the only 2 books out in the series, but I have only read The Way of Kings. And like with the last one, this is pretty simple. I read this through June and the beginning of July, and this book is massive, and I have needed a break from the world ever since then, so I haven't continued the series yet. It's not often that I'm in the mood for a massive fantasy novel, so I probably won't continue this series immediately, but again, sometime in the near-ish future. Similar to The Way of Kings, the next one on this list is The Kingkiller Chronicle by Patrick Rothfuss. So far, only the first 2 books in this trilogy are out, and I have only read this one, The Name of the Wind, which is the first book in the trilogy. Like with the Stormlight Archive, all the books in this series are rather large. The next one in the series is 1,000 pages long, and it's not often that I'm in the mood to pick up such a large book. Once again, the only reason that I haven't moved on to the second book is because it is 1,000 pages long, and I'm not always in the mood to pick up such a massive book. But like with the Stormlight Archive, I did really love this first book, so I will definitely continue the series, but probably a bit closer to the release of book 3. Next up on the list is the Magic 2.0 trilogy by Scott Meyer, of which I only own this book, book 1, which is Off to Be the Wizard. This is a really fun, light-hearted series that's kind of a mix of historical fiction and fantasy and technology, and while I really enjoyed this first book, I have not yet been in the mood to continue the series. This book didn't totally blow me away, and I did only read it like 2 months ago, so I just simply haven't been in the mood to continue the series yet, and therefore I haven't. Next up on the list is the Darker Shade of Magic series by V.E. Schwab. To be honest, I'm not quite sure how I feel about continuing this series. The more I think back, the more I think that I maybe kind of overrated the first book, as in, like, I think maybe I gave this a higher rating than it really deserved, and nothing about the book really stands out to me that much in my memory. Like, I remember the plot, but I don't remember being incredibly impressed by it. So far, only this one and book 2 are out, and I've only read this one, and I'm starting to wonder whether or not I actually want to continue the series. I think I probably still will because I already have book 2 and because I did like this first book. My only real problem here is that I just don't feel incredibly compelled to continue the series for one reason or another. But like I said, I do already have book 2, so I'll probably continue the series at some point. I just really haven't been in the mood to read it for the entirety of the time the second book has been out. The next series on this list is a booktube / middle grade standard, and that is the Percy Jackson and the Olympian series by Rick Riordan. In my own defense, I started reading these books as they were coming out in junior high. When I first read the series, only the first 3 books of the series were out, and those are the only 3 that I've read. I guess by the time that the 4th one came out, I'd kind of lost interest in the series, and while I eventually did go back and get all 5 books in the series, I have never gone back and finished it. My reasoning at this point is that if I did want to read the last 2 books in the series, I'd have to go back and reread the entirety of the series because I only vaguely remember what happens in this one and remember almost nothing about books 2 and 3. So for this series, I'm kind of waiting until I'm in the mood for some sort of middle grade fantasy before actually picking this up again. Like with some other series that I've talked about, I haven't felt this like intense need to read this series, and until I feel like I really want to read it, I probably won't. And I also haven't ever felt the need to continue on past this series into the Heroes of Olympus, so that's one thing that a lot of people really love that I don't really have much interest in. Okay, so now we're starting to move into the books where I'm not really sure whether or not I really want to continue on with these series. So basically there are 4 more series left, and I have them in order from like most likely to continue reading to most likely to not continue reading. So the first one that I have here is the Chew comic series by John Layman. This is the only volume of the comic series that I own, and it's also the only one that I've read. I read this back in February, and I'm not sure how many volumes are out, but it's somewhere around the neighborhood of like maybe 13 or 14. And as y'all know, trade comics can be pretty expensive. They can sometimes be more expensive than new books, and they take a lot less time to read, and they're a lot smaller. My point here in saying this is that reading a trade comic series can be expensive because you go through the trade comics a lot more rapidly, and they're typically a lot more expensive than most books. Fortunately, my local library does have the majority of the volumes, but once again, if I wanted to get them for myself or if I wanted to continue past what my library has, I'd have to shell out the money for all of these volumes that would take me an hour to read and then sit on my shelves. And as for the series itself, I did like this first volume. There are definitely series that I've already talked about on this list that I feel less optimistic about in general as far as how much I like it. But I also don't have this like strong desire or need to continue on in the series, and especially given that I don't have that, I don't think that I could justify spending money on several more volumes. At At this point, I'm probably likely to check out the following volumes from the library, but I also am wary of checking those out, getting invested in the series, and then having to buy several volumes after that. So I think that I might continue on with the Chew series, but I'm not entirely sure. Back when Lindsay Ray was still making videos, she raved about this series, but I haven't heard much else about it or anyone else talking about it, so let me know down in the comments if you like the Chew series and if it gets better after this first volume, because I think I gave this 7.5 stars out of 10 or 3 out of 5, so I liked it and it was close to getting 4 stars, but it didn't necessarily blow me away. Next on the list is the Magisterium series by Cassandra Clare and Holly Black. I read this first book, The Iron Trial, back during the Booktubeathon in July, and I believe that I gave it 8 stars out of 10, which translates to 4 out of 5. So you hear that rating and you think, okay, so that's a pretty decent rating, that's 4 out of 5, you must really want to continue on the series. And that's not necessarily how I feel. Don't get me wrong, I enjoyed this book, I thought it was a good first book, but like with a lot of the series that I've talked about, I don't feel incredibly compelled to continue the series. I feel like at times this book got a little bit too childish for my taste, and I know that it's a middle grade book and obviously it is for a younger audience than 22-year-old me, but I don't know, I just felt it was a little more childish than what I was looking for in a series. This is another one where if I do continue the series, I will most likely check it out from the library before I buy another book in the series, but I'm a little bit more on the fence about this one than I am about Chew. The next series on this list is one that I am very seriously considering not continuing, and that is the Chaos Walking trilogy by Patrick Ness. Of the series, all 3 books are out, but I have only read this book, The Knife of Never Letting Go. I first started this book in November of 2014. I got part of the way through it and put it down, and then I read it all the way through back in like August or September of last year. I believe that I gave this 7.5 stars, which translates to 3 out of 5 on Goodreads, so I liked it, but I wasn't blown away by it. And that's kind of why I am thinking about not continuing the series. I have heard that the second and third books get better, but I just thought this one was alright. I think that the world that Patrick Ness has created is really, really cool, but I don't think that the story so far has been incredibly compelling. Back when I first started watching BookTube, the series got a ton of hype, and a lot of people were saying that it's one of their favorite trilogies of all time, but after reading the first book, I feel like I don't get it. Like I said, I have heard that the books get better as they go along, but the next 2 books are also quite a bit longer than this first one, and I don't know if I am invested enough in the series to read 2 more books that just get bigger and bigger as they go along. But seriously though, let me know down in the comments if this is a series that you really enjoyed and if the second and third books are significantly better than this one. Because at this point, a full year after I finished this book, I'm kind of left with a bit of a ho-hum feeling about it. And finally, we've come to the last series on this list, which I am like 90% sure I will not be continuing, and that is the Fade Out series by Ed Brubaker. I got this first volume back in the summer of 2015, and that's when I read it, and I was really, really excited about it because, I mean, look at this cover. I have mentioned this cover several times. I love this cover. It is probably my favorite book cover ever. The concept also was really interesting to me as well because it had this kind of like film noir murder mystery thing going on, and that sounded really cool. But then I read this first volume and I was incredibly underwhelmed. Nothing really stuck with me at all about this comic, from the characters to the plot to any potential subplots if there were any. I honestly remember barely anything about this because I just was really unimpressed. Maybe the series gets better after this, but I have reached a point of ambivalence that I probably will not overcome. I'll keep this because of its gorgeous cover, but like I said, I'm fairly certain I won't be continuing the series. So I know that I said that that was the last one, but then I looked down at my comic series and I realized that there were 2 series on there that I was so not planning to read that I forgot they were there. So just briefly, first of those 2 is The Sandman by Neil Gaiman. I read this first volume back in February, and it was one of those situations where I could appreciate that it was a well-crafted story, but I didn't like it. Like, the series is probably really awesome for someone out there. I know that Jeff from Ermagerd Books loves the series, but it's just not for me. I thought it was a good story, but I didn't enjoy reading it, and I didn't particularly like it. I have considered checking out the subsequent volumes from the library because I'm pretty sure my library has all of them, but probably not. And then the actual last one is one where there's about a 0.0001% chance that I will continue the series, and that is Ghosted by Joshua Williamson. I picked this up at a comic shop while I was in Oxford, which is why I did not get rid of this volume, but I read this and I was incredibly underwhelmed. I think I gave it 5 out of 10, 4.5 out of 10. It got like 2 stars out of 5 from me on Goodreads. Essentially, there was nothing incredibly compelling about this, whether the story or the characters. I just didn't think anything about this was impressive, and I looked on Goodreads to see what the reviews were for the subsequent volumes, and they were all about as underwhelming as this one. Like, I usually don't put too much stock on Goodreads ratings, but they all had like a 3.5 rating out of 5, which is typically not that great on Goodreads, so I just assumed that the quality of the next few is about the same as this one and decided that it wouldn't be worth it to try and continue. So that is it for my unfinished series that I have on my shelves. Like I said, please let me know down in the comments about your opinions on those last few that I talked about. Let me know what you think, whether or not I should continue the series. I'm not sure how much it will sway my opinion, but if someone makes a really compelling case one way or the other, it could have some sort of impact. As always, I will leave links down in the description to my blog, Twitter, and Goodreads. Please add me as a friend on Goodreads. I would love to be friends with all of you. Like, comment, subscribe, all that jazz. Thank you so much for watching. Bye!